Hi, my name is Mark Posner, and we built a dice game called Farkle. What I did was work on the function to make the random dice roller, and these are my teammates.
My name is Marsh, and I worked on the graphics and the sound.
My name is Yusuf. I worked on a winning function, and I'm going to edit this video.
So we all did a certain part at home. Multiple times we had to come together and work on it together. So really we did most of the work as a team together, working on it, right next to each other. So, and we'll show you our game now.
Okay, so we'll start with the finished program here. The goal of the game is to be the first person to score 5,000 points. Each player gets 2 rolls. They get to keep as many dice as they want on their second roll, and we follow these scoring guidelines. So to play the game, the first player presses their roll button. They get a random set of dice, and they choose which dice they want to keep. After choosing, they press the second roll button, and their score is automatically generated, and it's the second player's turn. For the second player to have their turn, they press the roll button, get their random dice, and they choose which ones they want to keep. And they press roll again, and their score is automatically generated. And you just keep doing that until somebody gets 5,000 points. Okay, so this is our main function here.
So when the first player wants to roll the dice for the first time, he'll press the roll button. This callback will be called, and it will then right away turn off the button, disable the button, so it can no longer be pressed. Otherwise, he'd be able to roll again and again. We have an array called dice kept, and we zero it out. And when that array is passed into the random die roller function, it returns an array of 6 random dice values, and these values are strings, and they are the JPEG files for each die picture. So here's the function random die roller that it calls. And the first thing it does is loads each JPEG into the variables 1 through 6. And then it looks at the passed in array to make sure they're all zeros. If they're all 0, every die value will get a random value. If there is an integer within this array of 6 zeros, then that integer will be the value that's returned to keep that die that the player selected. How it works is it checks if there's a value in the first element of the array. If there is, then it will hold that value. If there is a 0 in the first element, then it will take and replace that output with a random die value here. And it does that for all 6 dice. As you can see here. At the end, there's a for loop, and this ensures that the values that are passed into the random die roller function, if they're not a 0, then those values will be returned untampered by the random function generator. So the random die roller will return A, B, C, D, E, F, which will all be JPEG strings, which will then be shown here with the IM show.
Our scoring function is pretty simple. Our input array is the random rolled dices called rolls, and then we check the dice values using sum and rolls equals to the value of dice. In this case, it's 1. And then I put a switching case function here to see how, what will be our points when we get, let's say, 0 ones, 1 ones, 2 ones, and like that. And then I implemented this code for every dice values. Is here is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the final score is the sum of all these possibilities.
To make our game a little bit easier to play, we wanted to disable all the buttons that weren't currently being used. So to do that, initially we only wanted the first player's roll 1 button enabled. You can see how we did that here. The first button is enabled and everything else is turned off. Just to show where the dice are, in the beginning of the game, we show the dice going from 1 to 6, as you can see here. So next, what we wanted to do is when you press the roll button, we want that to immediately be disabled, and after the dice are done rolling, we want to enable roll 2. I'll show you that now. Okay, so how we did that is in our player 1 roll 1 callback, we immediately disable the roll 1 button, as you can see here, and we play our sound and do our rolling function, and when the roll is over, we enable the roll 2 button and disable all of the checkboxes. Now for the second roll here, we want to, as soon as you press the button, we want to disable the player 1 roll 2 button, and then when it's done rolling, we calculate the score here, we update the score, we check if they win, and if they win, we show a picture that tells them, yay, you won, and then we enable the second player's roll 1 button, and we disable everything else. I'll show you that now. So I press the roll 2 button for player 1, and then the roll 1 button is enabled. Now in the player 2 roll 1 function, it's exactly the same thing, only for player 2. We disable the roll 1 button, we do the roll, and then we enable roll 2 and enable all the boxes. And the same thing for roll 2. Everything is exactly the same, except at the end of this one, instead of we want to go back to player 1. So you can see here, we disable player 2 roll 2, we do our roll, we update the score, we check if they win, and then we go back to player 1 roll 1. So here's player 2 roll 1, and say they wanted to keep some, we'll check a couple boxes. We'll go to roll 2. It calculates your score, and then goes back to roll one, and then everything just keeps on going from there.